Hey there, today we're going to be working on number 10, rational notes, simplifying rational expressions, and this is going to be with factoring. You guys factored before we started this rational notes unit, but before we went, I think we started the trimester with this. So when you're doing this, simplifying rational expressions, the first thing you want to do is factor the top if it can be factored. So we're going to say factor the top of the fraction, so the numerator. And then, if necessary, you're also going to factor the bottom, if necessary. And just like our last assignment, if you have anything that's the same on the top and the bottom, you're going to cancel those out. So cancel out any factors that are the same. And then state undefined values. I kind of like to flip-flop these. I would rather state my undefined values first and then cancel out just to make sure I get them all. Sometimes when they're when you cancel them, you can't tell if it's addition or subtraction, so it's just easier to do it beforehand. All right, let's look at this first one. Okay, you know you have to factor if your first term is a squared term. So when we're looking at this top one right here, that just says x plus 2. So there's nothing that's squared there, so I don't have to factor that one. But when I look at this bottom one, because of that squared, I do have to factor. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my x. And remember, it's a times c. So my a comes with the squared value, my b comes with the x value, and my c is all by itself. So I'm going to take that 2 times what's in front here, which is a 1. So 2 times 1 is 2. And my b goes on the bottom, and that's a 3. And then I'm going to look on my factor chart and see all the numbers that multiply to 2. Well, there's only 2 numbers that multiply to 2, 1 and 2. So I'm going to put a 1 here and a 2 here. And those do add up to that bottom 3. So that works. So in the past, we've had you rewrite your x squared, your whole equation, rewrite that and replace that middle with my 1x and my 2x. Remember, we put x's on here. Okay. Instead, I'm going to teach you a new way, and I'm going to show you what we used to do and show you how we're going to do it now. That's a whole lot faster. So I'm going to start with my x squared. So I'm going to say x squared plus 1x plus 2x, and then I end with my c value, which is a 2, so plus 2. I'm going to group my first 2 and group my second 2. Before, we tried to figure out what was in common between x squared and 1x, and that was an x. And between 2x and 2, and that was a 2. Okay? And then we would put our x out front, and x squared divided by x is x, 1x divided by x is 1, and then we had a positive 2 in the middle, and then 2x divided by 2 is x, and 2 divided by 2 is 1. Okay? Our whole goal was to get these two to match, x plus 1, x plus 1. And when that happened, we would say x plus 1 as one of ours, and the outside x plus 2, and I'm getting that from this guy and this guy. Okay? And then we'd say that's factored. So I just did that. Okay? There's a faster way. You guys ready? And we wanted you to understand why we took it, like why we taught you how to do that, but there's easier way to figure this out. Notice that these two, and I'm going to highlight so you can see what I'm doing here. These two, the 1x and the 2x, if I were to take those and put parentheses, I'm going to start with my x, and I'm going to use the first thing that's on my left side, and it's a 1. So I'm going to say x plus 1. And then I'm going to do the same thing with my other side, but first I'm going to start with x, and then I have that one, and because it's a 2 and it's a positive 2, I'm going to say plus 2. Notice that those are exactly the same. And it wouldn't matter if I flipped them around. Let's say I had my 2 on my left side. I could say x plus 2 and x plus 1. Okay, those all work, but notice that they're all the same. So we're going to do it the fast way from here on out. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of all of this. And you still have to factor, but you can factor the fast way. So I'm going to say equals, put my line in there. Okay, my x plus 2 on the top is going to stay x plus 2. That's not going to change, but my bottom is going to turn it into those two sides. So I'm going to use a parenthesis x. My first one's a 1, so I'm going to say x plus 1. Use parenthesis, my next one's a 2, so I'm going to say x plus 2. Okay, now I'm going to state my excluded values, the ones that are my undefined. Excluded means the same thing. So I'm going to say x cannot equal, before it was a positive 1 on the bottom. So I'm looking at this one right here because that was a positive 1. Now I'm going to use a negative 1. And then I'm also going to do my next one, x cannot equal, because this was a positive 2, it's going to be opposite, so it's going to be a negative 2. Okay, so I did my EVs, that's one of mine. And then to simplify, just like yesterday, if there is anything that was on the top and the bottom that are the same, you cancel those out. So I'm going to cancel this out, and I'm going to cancel this out. So that leaves me left with nothing on top, so I'm just going to leave that open for right now, and x plus 1 on the bottom. You can put parentheses around them, you don't have to. If there's nothing left on top, you have to put that 1. Okay, so we simplified, and we found our undefined values, so number 1 is done. Let's try number 2. Okay, again, I'm looking for anything with an x squared. The top has x plus 7, so I don't have to do anything with that, but the bottom does have an x squared. So I'm going to go ahead and make that x. I'm going to take my c times my a, so negative 35 times 1, and I get negative 35. And then my b goes on my bottom, so I'm going to put a 2 on the bottom. Two numbers that multiply to negative 35, but would add or subtract to 2, would be a negative 5 and a 7. Okay, so now I'm going to do the fast way. That x plus 7 is going to stay in x plus 7, so I'm just going to leave that the same. And then I'm going to put these two things on the bottom inside parentheses, though, and they both start with an x. So I'm going to say x, because it's a negative 5, my first one's a negative 5, I'm going to say x minus 5. And because my second one's is a positive 7, I'm going to say x plus 7. Okay, now I'm going to do my EVs. So I'm going to start with, oops, that's not a highlighter. I'm going to start with this one right here. That was x minus 5. So I'm going to say x cannot equal. The opposite of a negative 5 is a positive 5. And then I'm going to do this one. The opposite of a positive 7 is a negative 7. So there's my EVs for those two. Now I'm going to simplify more. If I have something that's the same on the top and the bottom, I'm going to cancel it out. So I have a 7, and x plus 7, and x plus 7. Those are exactly the same. Notice the bottom one has parentheses around it and the top doesn't. That doesn't matter. Those parentheses are just to say that x minus 5 and that x plus 7, those are being multiplied together. Okay, so we're just going to cancel that x plus 7, that x plus 7. So I'm left with x minus 5 on the bottom, nothing left on top, so I'm going to put a 1. So here's my simplified answer, and then my EVs are down there at the bottom. Let's try number 3. Okay, so another thing that you have to look out for is if you can take a greatest common factor out of anything. So when I'm looking at this top one right here, I have 2 times x minus 6. Okay, because 2 and 6 are both even numbers, I can take a 2 out of both of those. So I'm going to divide both by a 2. So if I were going to do that, my top, I'm going to put my 2 on the outside. If I had 2x divided by 2, that just leaves me with an x left over. And if I had a negative 6 divided by 2, that's going to leave me with a negative 3. Okay, so the first thing I did was take my greatest common factor out of that top one. It's not a squared value, so I didn't have to factor it, but I do have to look to see if it has a greatest common factor. Okay, my bottom has x squared, so I know I'm going to have to make this x right here because of that squared. I'm going to put my 12 on top, my 13 on the bottom. Two numbers that multiply to 12 and add to 13 are 1 and 12. Now I'm going to do the fast, so I'm going to say x plus 1, x plus 12. And now I'm going to do my EVs. So x cannot equal, when I look at that first one, right now it's a positive 1, so it's going to be a negative 1. When I look at my second one, x cannot equal, right now it's a positive 12, so now it's going to be a negative 12. Okay, when I look at my top and my bottom, does anything overlap? Is there anything that's exactly the same on the top and the bottom? And there's not. So this one is just going to be our final answer for that one. We don't have to simplify that anymore. Okay, let's try number 4. Okay, same thing. I'm going to look and see if there's a greatest common factor. So on the top, I have a 3 and a 12. And I can take a 3 out of both of them. So because I can take a 3 out of both of them, that 3 is going to go on the outside. 3x divided by 3 is just going to give me an x. And negative 12 divided by 3 is going to give me a negative 4. Okay, my bottom has the x squared, so I know I have to factor it. 10 times 1 is 10. Negative 7 is going to go on the bottom for my b. And then two numbers that multiply to a positive 10 but would add or subtract to a negative 7 would be a negative 2 and a negative 5. Remember, two negatives makes that positive 10 at the top, but then two negatives make a bigger negative for your b, your bottom. Okay, I'm going to do the fast method, so I'm going to say x minus 2 and x minus 5. And remember, I'm getting those from right here. And now I'm going to do my EVs. I'm going to say x cannot equal. Initially, it was a negative 2, so now it's going to be a positive 2. And x cannot equal. It was a negative 5, so now it's going to be a positive 5. Remember, we can't have that 0 on the bottom, so that's why we're getting rid of, if we were to make it a 0, that's where we can use any number besides those two numbers because those two numbers make it a 0. Okay, now I'm going to look. Is there anything on the top and the bottom that I can cancel out of my fraction? And they're all different, so that one is just going to stay exactly as it is. All right, let's flip over and do two more on the back. Okay, so when I look at this one, notice that this one has an x squared on the top and an x squared on the bottom. That means that I need to do two different x's. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one, and this one is going to be my top one. Okay, so I'm going to put a negative 20 on the top and a negative 8 on the bottom. And two numbers that multiply to negative 20 but would subtract to negative 8 would be a 2 and a negative 10. Okay, so now on the top, I'm just going to write that same thing. So I'm going to say x, and it's a positive 2, and I'm going to say x, and it's a negative 10. Okay, now I'm going to do another x, and now I'm going to look at this one right here, and that's going to be this. Okay, so on the top, it's going to be a negative 40, and on the bottom, it's going to be a negative 6. Two numbers that multiply to negative 40 but would subtract to a negative 6 would be a 4 and a negative 10. Okay, so now I just get to put those here. X plus 4, it's positive, and x minus 10 because it's negative. Do my EVs, so x cannot equal. I'm only looking at the bottom. The bottom, the first one was a positive 4, so I'm going to use a negative 4. And I'm going to do my other one. Right now it's a negative 10, so now it's going to be a positive 10. Okay, and remember, you're not done until you simplify, because I have an x minus 10 right here and right here. Those get to cancel out. So I'm going to cancel this one out and cancel that one out. And then I'm just left with that x plus 2 on the top and x plus 4 on the bottom. And you don't have to do anything after that. You're just going to leave that just like it is. Okay, let's look at the last one, number 6. Okay, I'm looking at number 6, and again, I see x squared on both the top and the bottom, so that tells me I'm going to have to make two of those x's. So let's start with this one right here is going to be this one right here. So on my top, I'm going to put that 32. On the bottom, I'm going to put this 12. Two numbers that multiply to 32, but would add to 12 would be an 8. And a 4, and you guys have your factor chart, so you can use those if you need to. So on the top, I'm going to say x plus 8 and x plus 4. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the bottom. I'm going to factor this one like this. And I got this right there. So I'm going to have 56 on the top and 15 on the bottom. Two numbers that multiply to 56 but add to 15 would be a 7 and an 8. So I'm going to say x plus 7, x plus 8. My EVs, x cannot equal, it was a positive 7, so now it's going to be a negative 7. X cannot equal, it was a positive 8, so now it's going to be a negative 8. And I'm going to look, is there anything that's the same on the top and bottom? I have x plus 8 and x plus 8. So now I just am going to simplify that, and I'm going to say, oops, the pencil's not working, there it goes. I'm going to say x plus 4 on the top, and x plus 7 on the bottom. And that is all you will be doing today. So it's something that you've done in the past lessons. We're just adding factoring, which you've also done before. So you are set to work on number 10, rational practice.